In this video, what we're going to do is take a look through some of the demo tracks I've written for Novella Origin. And the format's going to be, I'll play the full track and then just flick through some of the instruments as they're like happening, so you can see the MIDI data as it's flying by. And then after that, I'll solo some of the tracks so you can actually see, you know, the individual instruments, exactly how it's been made up, what I've used in the library, and then some mixing tips as well. But the caveat is this is not a mixing tutorial by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a very average mixer. I get by. I do mix all of the demo tracks that I write myself for Westwood, so at least you'll be able to see what a very average mixer can achieve with this library. So with all that being said, let's get on with the first track. So the first track we're going to look at is called The End Is Near, and this is like the main title track that I've used for all the trailers. A few people ask me like how you come up with the names. I've no idea. I've got a list of cool words and stuff that I'm always, you know, keeping and stuff. But The End Is Near, this track was written 2 or 3 weeks before the release of Novella Origin. It was a year in the making, this library, so The End Is Near seemed quite, you know, pertinent for the whole track. So let's take a look at the whole track and then we'll dive in after that. So the main challenge I always find with the title tracks for this, and this is a good challenge to set yourself, is to try and show off the library within the time limit. 60 seconds-ish is how long I give myself, and it's really tricky to get everything that you want to show about the library off in there. I think I've done an okay job. I'm pretty happy with it. It's one of those tracks where I ran out of time. I didn't finish it. But I think it's okay. So the first thing I do, I mean, I've not got the video loaded because it's causing issues with screen flow, technical issues, you know how it goes. But what I have left in is the markers up the top, and I tend to do this for a lot of stuff, even if it's not being synced to video, is just to give yourself, you know, hit points and things to achieve. So I've got up here intro, the instruments where those were being kind of demonstrated on screen, shots of the UI, and then a bit where it says take it down, and then a bit where it says bring it up, where I like to bring the mood down and then bring it back up again. And then there's this section here where it's like 4 composers, 4 music makers, all those kind of things, and then the actual title card at the back there. So that's just an insight about how, you know, I lay out and how I structure the trailers. The other thing that I've got up here while we're up at the top here is just a bit of a tempo map as well. I've just bought it from like this kind of area here, so 75, 76, just slowly increasing the speed as the track goes along, just to make it a bit more exciting. So let's dive in and have a little listen to some of these individual tracks. So we've got the choir first. Let's bring up Kontakt. So this is this Chatters sound that I absolutely love. Such a great sound. I'm really in love with that sound, and I've just got the mix on there. I think on most of these tracks I've got the reverb turned off within Kontakt, and then I've added it afterwards, so we'll have a look at that shortly. So that's the chatter sound, and then the main sort of like synth theme that's happening throughout the track is these big notes here. So that's using Act 2 from Wanderlust, nothing complicated about that at all. And then I've also put these other synth sounds in as well. You can barely hear these in the mix, but I still think they're quite cool, which is these ones. And that's using Act 3 from Wanderlust as well. Again, nothing crazy happening. I've not really touched them. I kind of really like the sounds just as they are in Wanderlust. And then it's got this, what have we got up here? The Viola Flattando Random Rebo. Absolutely love that sound. As you can hear, as we're pushing up the dynamics, it's getting a bit faster and a bit more lively. So that's really cool. And then let's just listen to the strings that I've got here. I'll play them all together. Let's add them all like that. Really cool. All of these are using the Vivid Legato patch in the library. Really cool. I really like this section I've done here. A little melody. Really cool, really happy with those. I get a lot of the theme of this track is way too much reverb. I was kind of adding more and more and more and kind of like pumping it up a little bit more. And now I'm listening to it in isolation. I'm like, oh, that's maybe a bit too much reverb, but that's the way it goes, isn't it? I tend to think reverb solves a lot of issues and maybe it shouldn't be used to solve those issues. Maybe I should just be better at writing. Let's have a listen to the piano next, because this kind of happens throughout the whole track. There we go. I'm not one for quantizing. You'll realise that by the end of this video that I tend to not quantize stuff. There's a few certain situations that I do, but most of the time, for drums maybe, but for a lot of the other instruments, I tend to just play it in and then kind of tweak as I go. So what you'll find is a lot of it is quite loose in terms of its timing. The guitar next, and the guitar is what started off this whole track. This was supposed to be like the main theme of the whole track, and then it just, as you know how this thing goes, you start writing something and then you're adding stuff, and then the first thing that you wrote is buried somewhere deep in there. So this guitar line, I still like it, I think it's still cool, but this is not really that featured in the track anymore. It's just kind of there. So you can hear there way too much reverb, first of all, but the sustain notes are really cool. I've just got the mix loaded. So yeah, that's the theme that started off the whole track, but now it's kind of a bit lost. Maybe I should resuscitate it into another track. Okay, let's just go back to the strings, and what I want to show you is these ensemble chords that really are there to kind of beef up tracks. You can totally use them on their own, but what I tend to do is write the string passage and then add these ensemble chords to kind of like boost it up if the track needs it. You know, obviously you don't always need things like this. Let's add these here. So we've just got the ensemble chords, and you'll see if you've watched the walkthrough that you've got these low positions, high positions, and then wide, and I've kind of used all three as the track builds up. So let's listen to these in isolation, and then we'll add them to the strings to see what they sound like. So there you can hear, like, you know, they're quite sort of beefy on their own, but then let's add in the strings as well, and then you'll hear what that whole effect is together. And then right at the end as well, I think this is where I've started to use all three of the positions. Amazing. Those big, like, 9 chords at the end, absolutely love those. Really cool. The other thing that I've done with the strings as well is added these spiccato lines here. So we've got violin, viola, and cello. Is that too much reverb? I think so. Maybe I should dial that down a bit and do another mix. The other thing that I'm really bad at is I've got my tracks badly labelled. That should be a cello. There we go. Know your shortcuts for labelling tracks. The violin and the viola are playing an octave apart, and then the cello's playing an octave down there as well. So you've got all of it's the same line, but everybody's playing slightly differently. Everybody's playing a slightly different octave. But everybody's swamped in reverb, so at least that's happening. The last thing that I did here was added this little kind of like small section. I thought maybe because I've used so much reverb in the rest of the track that I'll do something that isn't quite as swamped in reverb. So you've just got this little section here. Still quite a lot of reverb, but you know, less reverb, so that's always a good thing. I think that's oh no, let's have a look at the drums. Didn't show you any of the drums. Solo these. Too much reverb again. What are you going to do? So yeah, these I probably would have played these in and then snapped these a bit more closely to the grid. This pedal hi-hat here is definitely programmed in, no bones about that, but that just kind of like goes through the whole track. And what I've got is just the close mic turned on. I don't think there's any of the others. No, it's just the close mic and then a hefty dump of reverb to destroy the whole signal. I have got the cymbal swells on a separate track. I kind of, you can program these in the same track, but I kind of quite like keeping everything separate so you've got a bit more control over it. So this is the cymbal swell at the beginning. I don't know, I quite like just keeping things separate. It's easier to keep on top of. It's easier to kind of like see where things are going in and out. So I think that's everything for the main track. Overall theme, too much reverb, but apart from that, I'm happy with how I've sort of managed to demonstrate as much as I can in the library as possible. Right, let's have a look at the next one. Okay, this next track is called Regrets and Redemption, and this is really inspired by Warren Ellis and Nick Cave. Their scores are absolutely phenomenal. If you've not heard them before, go and check them out, because all their scores are like this. Not all of them, but a large majority. And it's kind of like this really, I find this music really, really difficult to write because it's so stripped back. There's hardly any instruments in there. I'm not hiding behind a blanket wall of reverb. There's hardly any reverb on this at all. It's just, you know, really, really dry. And you're kind of having to let your songwriting and your musicianship do all of the work. And if you've not got much of that, like I haven't, then, you know, you've got a lot of work to do. So let's play the track and then I'll show you how it's all been made. Not bad. Overall, I'm quite happy with it. I could probably spend another 3 or 4 days tinkering with it and it could still be a little bit better. But like, it's one of those tracks that I've spent so long on it now for such a simple track as well that I've kind of like lost all perspective of it. Is it good? Is it bad? I don't even know anymore. So you let me know what you think. Anyway, let's have a look at some of these individual instruments. So we've got the piano doing the whole thing, and the piano is what I wrote first. This was basically played in pretty much live, and then within a few takes I kind of like had what I was happy with, and none of this has been touched. Again, it's one of those tracks I just wanted to feel quite loose and natural as possible anyway. So this is the piano. I've got the close and the rear mics turned on. The rear mics are absolutely brilliant. I don't think I've featured them in the main walkthrough, but have a little listen to the rear mics when you get this, because they're absolutely brilliant. And just the close, no reverb on at all. I'll show you the reverb in a minute. And then the strings, I've got violins, 2 sets of violas, a cello and a bass. 2 violas. Since starting a sample library company and recording violas, they are better than violins, and I'm going to cause a few arguments now in the comments. Give them way more work and more attention than the violins, because I don't know, there's a sound behind them. In Solo Strings Untamed, I prefer the viola to the violin. It's the same guy playing on both of those patches, so he won't mind me saying this. But yeah, I think that don't give the violins all the attention, all the love. They get too much as it is. Give the violas some love. So that's why I've used 2 in here. One for like complementing the violins, and then one for kind of like a counter melody as well. The bass I've just got using the flatando patch just to make it super soft. And with all of them, there's no reverb at all. I've just got the close mics turned on for all of them to get the driest sound possible. And then for the mix, what I've got, let me show you this. Tiny bit of EQ on each one, just to take out some bumps in this specific track. On the piano, I've got a tiny bit of compression. This is the EQ I've got there for the piano. I did have it originally just absolutely naked without any EQ. But I just wanted to make it a little bit brighter and a little bit thinner to kind of like jump over the top of the cellos and the basses. With it as without any EQ, it sounds lovely. It sounds really nice. It sounds really nice and warm, but it wasn't quite hitting where it needed to. So that's why I did that EQ curve. And then the compression as well. I've got you could use any compressor for this. I've got FabFilter stuff, mainly because the interfaces are so easy to use. They're easy to use plugins. Do they sound better than stock plugins? I don't think so, but they're just nicer to use and they get you in the right frame of mind quicker. And really all that's doing is taking off the very top end when the track gets a bit louder at the end. It's not really doing too much damage to kind of like manipulate the sound too much. And then for the strings, I've bust them all into one, not bust them, I've put them all into one kind of like subfolder here, and then routed them to get some reverb as well. And this is the Rich Room in Pro Eye. Again, like any stock reverb plugin's going to have something similar to this. It's absolutely minute delay. There's hardly reverb. There's hardly any kind of tail to it at all. Really, really dry. And what I also do is tend to, this is a trick loads of people use, but EQ the reverb. So EQ the signal before it hits the reverb, just to shape it a bit more. Let's just listen to the reverb on its own. So what I'm doing there is taking the bottom end and the top end out of the signal before it hits the reverb. And what that does is clean things up a little bit. Sometimes with reverb, you end up with a bit of the bottom end gets a bit muddy and a bit cluttered. So doing this sort of like really harsh cut takes away all that information. So I would recommend doing this is soloing your reverb bus so you can hear what the reverb sound like. And if that sounds good on its own, then you know you're on to a good one. But you can hear there's hardly any tail to that reverb at all. I wanted to keep it super dry and not hide behind reverb. That was the idea behind this track. On the master bus, what have I got? I've got this Pultec EQ, and this is what I always do with tracks sometimes, is this push-pull thing where everything's staying the same. Like you put everything, you know, roughly in the same positions, and it does some absolute magic to it. Let's listen with and without. Really subtle, but there's something there. And then I've got this kind of EQ curve on the master bus, and then a compressor as well. Again, really subtle compression, hardly anything going on at all. And then just a final limiter as well, just to pull the overall track up to a reasonable level and make sure nothing clips. But you're in a track like this, you shouldn't have anything clipping really. So that's the track. I've done this EQ, this tempo change as well. I'd recommend doing this, you know, a lot in your tracks, is making sure that the tempo just varies every now and again, especially for stuff like this where you're trying to emulate real musicians who do kind of like slip in and out of tempo. They're not locked to a click at all. And I've just raised the tempo here in the slightly faster section of the track and then pulled it down again at the end. So overall, I'm really happy. I don't think I'm going to be scoring any Nick Cave and Warren Ellis movies just yet. I'm not going to be taking their jobs away, but I'm happy with where it is. So I just wanted to show you that with Novella Origin, you can create these really, really small, intimate compositions. Let's have a look at the next one. Okay, this next track is called Strange Neighbours, and this was 2 demos to begin with, and you'll hear it. Now I've said that, you will hear that it's been 2 demos. There's the first half, and then there's the second half, and I was kind of like, these might go together. I haven't got an ending for this one, I haven't got a beginning for this one. Why don't I smash them together and see what happens? So yeah, you'll definitely see where the split is now I've told you about it, and that's why I called it Strange Neighbours, because it's these 2 things kind of like, you know, living next to each other, and they don't really belong to each other, but at the same time they do exist in the same place. The other thing you'll notice on this again is it doesn't really end. I just kind of like, as I was writing, I just went, that'll do, and then I'll fix the ending later and I'll do something. And then as I was writing more and more and like perfecting the rest of the track and just I'll do the ending later, it kind of just got left, and then I was like, actually it sounds all right. So you'll kind of hear the end. It doesn't really resolve, it just sort of like dribbles away, and then that's kind of it. But I quite like that. I think that's quite a nice part of the track now. So something that I didn't spend any attention on, I actually ended up quite liking. Not always the things that you put all of your effort into end up being the best. That's the lesson here. Anyway, let's listen to the full track, and then we'll dive in and listen to some of the individual instruments. There we go. So I think as I've pointed out now, you'll probably hear that is two kind of like very different feelings kind of smashed together. But I don't know. I think they work. I quite like the weirdness of the whole track. So it is built up of the first little bit here is this synth line, which I love. These sounds are so good. This is, if I can bring it up, Act 3, is it? I've got it as Act. The other thing you'll notice is none of my tracks are labelled properly. Let's fix that. So that's Act 3. These aren't labelled properly. Shortcut is Shift Option N. There we go. That's better. That's neater. Hopefully you'll see that these are like in the raw state that many of your tracks will be, and they're not like super polished, and I've not tidied them up just for the purposes of this video. There is kind of like, you know, warts and all. Really love that synth sound. Let's just solo the drums on their own. Love these. So these are the felt beaters. I've just got the mix here with the studio reverb turned on, and I just think that these sound great. I really love them. And then these muted, these picks next. Let's pull these together. Hang on. And these are the picks. So I've got here the double bass, cellos, and violas all playing this picks articulation. If I can pull it up. So really like loosely played picks. I absolutely love this sound. Let's just dive in a little bit closer to these. I think yeah, these are one of the few things that I do quantize, because there's quite a lot of variation in the actual samples themselves, because we're asking them not to play exactly on the grid and as tightly as possible. On these picks, maybe it's better to actually click them to the grid, and then the variation will actually happen in the sample. So if let's listen to these individually. So I've got two sets of cellos there. One bass, and then the violas up top. Such a great sound. Really, really happy with that. And then it smashes into this next bit. So the drums go into sort of like the same kind of feeling, but just a bit more washy. And I would have played these in and then quantized them, because I am terrible at keyboard drums. But the second half of this track, I just wanted to be like really loose and relaxed and have this sort of like dreamy feel to it. The piano and the synth, absolutely. I can't believe how nicely these two sounds work together. So the piano first. Sounds great on its own. Trans pitch set to 6. A few people still don't know what this trans pitch control is. It is pitch shifting stuff down, transposing it back up. So you're still playing middle C, still sounds like middle C, it still has the same pitch center, but it just has that feeling of the samples being stretched down a little bit and kind of like slower, longer, deeper, darker performance. It's really good. It is my get out of jail free card now for most sounds. If I'm not sure what to do, if I want to make a sound like feel a bit more interesting, add trans pitch to it, and it's going to start to sound really cool. So that is the piano, and then the synth, and these two work so nicely together. So the synth is Finally Works from Wanderlust. As you can hear, it's not really in time, it's just like quite sloppily played. And that sounds great on its own, but together with the piano, they just complement each other really well. As you can hear, is that on the verge of like just bad playing, or is it on the verge of just being like relaxed timing? You tell me. And then we've got these unmeasured thumbs down at the bottom, which is the guitar. And this is just this kind of like sprinkle of like fairy dust just at the top of the track. But again, with the synth and the piano. Really dreamy, like those sounds all together, really cool. And then let's play you the strings that I've got, and these are both just the vivid legato, so I've got cellos and violas. Even there, the strings don't really resolve anywhere. Like you've got a feeling that those strings should actually resolve back down to the root again, and they don't. I just kind of went, that'll do, and then I'll fix it later. And then as it happens, like it actually works really nicely that the track finishes like that. The other thing that I've done just with the drums is the felt beaters, but for whatever reason, I've added this ride using the bamboo broomsticks. So I don't think you'd be able to do this all as one drummer because you'd need 3 hands, but it sounds good. So that's the drums. Let's just show you some of the mix as well. What have I done? Not an awful lot on this one. The piano has got nothing at all. Oh no, what has the piano got? The piano has got something. It's got a little bit of compression. Hardly anything, just something to, you know, keep it in check, and a bit of an EQ. Again, probably just to take out some of the bottom end so some of those other instruments can survive and live. And then on this Act 3 up here, compression and EQ. Let's have a little listen. Is that really doing anything? I mean, it's there, so it's got to be doing something right. I've no idea. I put it in. I must have thought there's a really good reason to add that tiny little boost up there, and then the compressor. Just kind of squashing it a little bit so you can hear it over the drums, and nothing else on the strings. They're really dry. I think actually there's nothing at all on these strings. I don't think there's even reverb. No, I've turned all the reverb off, so the strings are really, really dry on there, and the same again on these as well up here. Yeah, no reverb at all. So it is just the studio mix, which is kind of like the natural sound that you're going to get out of these strings. And then on the master bus, I've got a tiny bit of this tape effect on there. Any tape effect or saturation will do. This kind of lump on the EQ. A compressor just to keep check of everything. Just a bit of a gluey compressor. Like master bus compression shouldn't be doing an awful lot, I don't think. Here I've got 1.85 to 1, just to take some of the top end off and just make it all sit nicer, and then a limiter as well. And my limiters I tend to set at half a dB, minus half a dB. Some people I know kind of like jack them all the way up here. I find that like stuff like YouTube, once it goes through their systems and their algorithms, that sometimes it does end up peaking. So I always put a safety net of half a dB and then just push the gain up to wherever you think it needs to be to get it to the loudest point. So that is it. So hopefully you can see there's not an awful lot of mixing being done in there. It's mainly about instrumentation and getting the right sound in the first place. So that is that track. Right, let's have a look at the next one. So this track is called Your Secret Is Not Safe, and this was my attempt at like a gritty sort of like Netflix docudrama sort of title sequence opener. As we were writing the demo tracks, I was like, we need something like this because this library is going to really excel at this kind of music. So let's have a little listen to the full track, and then as always, we'll go in and dive into some of the individual tracks. Okay, let's have a little listen to some of these individual instruments. So the cello first, the flatando random rebo. And I've got set on this the trans pitch control as well. Hang on, get the right one open. All the way set to 12. So it makes it sound really dark and really moody. So that's really cool. And then the violas as well. So this is using the Sol Pont random rebo for just a slightly different edge. Again with trans pitch set to 6. And the aim with all of these is just to like slowly bring up this tension. And then these spiccato lines as well. Let's have a little, turn them all on. Building all the way up. No awards for composition there, all those just single notes are pretty standard. Okay, next onto the synth, and I've used Dawn Chorus for this from the Wanderlust. And here I've got the volume LFO turned on, turn it off. That's full accentuation, but then bring it back down a bit. Sounds really cool. It's just this continual drone sound that happens throughout the whole intro of the piece. And then let's go on to the drums. So the drums are kind of like really big. And these are just played in completely freely. There's no sort of quantizing to this. I've used the felt beaters, and what I've done is pitched everything down 6 semitones as well, so it sounds even bigger. Added a big hall reverb on as well, so they just sound really epic and big. And then let's listen to the choir. Using chatters again, it's such a great sound for this kind of thing. Okay, onto the piano next, and this is my favourite kind of stuff to write. Really simple stuff on the piano, not difficult to play, but really effective, and really inspired by people like Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, who do these amazing kind of like scores where it's just a really simple piano line, but it carries a lot of weight in the actual music itself. So this is using Cotton Upright. I've got obviously trans pitch turned on all the way up to 10, which adds this kind of like extra depth to the piano sound. But let's just listen first to how it sounds. Play a bit down here as well. Nothing complicated at all about that piano line, but I love how those kind of things turn out. So let's just turn the trans pitch off so you can hear it without. Like, nothing wrong with that at all, absolutely usable, but using the trans pitch control really kind of like pushes it into a new space. Probably got to go to 12. Adding more and more of this trans pitch control also just like takes a bit more delay to play the initial part of the sample and slows it down. So you've just got to be careful that you don't lose too much of the timing with it. Anyway, enough of the piano. Let's get on to this synth line that everything builds up to. So this is using Emotional Escape, and what I've done to get this kind of like pitch dive effect is just use the glide, and all I've done is programmed a note higher than the note, you know, the note that I want to glide from into, and then just kind of silenced it so you don't actually hear that note. All it's being used for is to trigger the glide. Oops, let's just... So that's one of the notes, and then there is another one up the top as well, like an octave higher. And then together. And what I've done for this, I have used quite heavy processing on this. I've used Sound Toys. What have I used? Decapitator, I think. Yeah, and Devil Lock, just to absolutely obliterate it. So this sound, you could make this sound pretty much using a sine wave and obliterate it to make it sound like this. So yeah, Decapitator, absolutely slamming it to the max to kind of like destroy that sound completely. I think that's everything. Oh no, let's just have a look. Let's have a little look at the viola line. So just something to complement the piano, the vivid legato, big hall reverb on there, and just the mix. Let's have a look at the overall mix of the track as well. I don't think there's loads going on like this. Absolutely, with all of the tracks, there's nothing going on except the drums, which I've put some compression on just to make them, you know, beefy, just to pull up that sound of the drums. And then, yeah, reverb on those synthesizers. And then for the actual mix itself, this kind of thing's going on. This is a parallel mix compression technique where the ratio is massive, so it is actually doing quite a lot of damage, but you're not mixing much of it in, you're just using it to kind of like take the very top end off. And then obviously just a limiter at the very end, just to keep everything in check. Same again, like half a dB, minus half a dB ceiling, and then just pushing up the gain to make sure it goes as loud as you need it to. Right, let's have a look at another one. Okay, last track I want to show you is called Find a Way, and this is really influenced by a band called the Cinematic Orchestra, who've been a huge influence of mine since I started listening to them over 20 years ago. That's showing you how old I am. The drums is like the main feature of the track. I really wanted to program in this like fast jazzy drum line, and I'm really happy with it. It's one of the best drum lines I've ever programmed, and it's still not amazing, so that's not saying a lot, but I'm really pleased with it either way. And then over the top of that, there's just these like sweeping legato string lines over the top. So as we've been doing for the rest of the video, let's have a look at the whole track first, and then we'll dive in and take a look at the individual instruments. We'll take a listen to the drums first, because this is the foundation of the track, and this is what I wrote first and kind of based everything else off of. We've got Bamboo Broomsticks from Daybreak loaded up, just with a mix, no reverb, nothing fancy going on at all. I've taken the reverb off just to add it on later for the main track. And this was played in badly and then programmed in and kind of tidied up afterwards. So as you can see, it's like one main rhythm driving throughout the whole track, and then I've just added in lots of little fills and ghost notes here and there just to kind of keep it interesting. Really, I love the sound of this kit. It's so cool. Such a good kit for this kind of thing. Okay, next we'll look at all the strings in the track, and there's quite a lot going on here, so we'll take it one by one. First of all, you've got this viola, like this pedal tone that's happening over the top of the track. This is not an improv, this is a flatando random rebar. I'll have to rename that track another time. You know what it's like when you're working fast and you can't be bothered to rename tracks. You know who you are. Such a great sound, just like keeping like the top end just going with that pedal tone. And then you've got this legato cello line. Using the vivid legatos, you can just let those notes hang on and ring out a little bit longer, and there's some really interesting stuff going on. You'll also notice that I am terrible at writing in legato lines. I tend to hang on my notes far too long. This should look like that. It doesn't really matter for the sound, but when you're on YouTube and you're showing your work to lots and lots of different people all around the world, I should probably tidy up. So yeah, it should look like that a little bit more. And then let's play the other lines as well. So much cool, interesting texture and details happening with those vivid legatos all the time. And then the viola carries on in the end here, playing this line. So bad. These should be like this. But you don't want to watch me change the length of legato lines. So let's have a little listen to the spiccatos next, these short ones. Again, quite loosely played in, didn't quantize these too much. And then the piano at the end. Again, not quantized too much. This is using the pedal down samples as well, which it just adds a bit more resonance to the whole sound. I quite like that pedal down piano sound. And then the drums carries on. It's the same kind of thing, but it's just a bit more lively. I've increased the velocities all a bit more as well. A few more crashes and a few more fills and things kind of happening. And then the synth line that comes in at the end. This is using Dawn Chorus. Great sound. and then these choir shorts. This is the short na sound. I've added loads of reverb on these. So all together at the end. So quite like a morning moving feeling to the whole track there. Let's just have a little look at what I've done to the mix. Not really a lot. I've kind of kept most things as they are. A bit of cut on the viola at the top there, I think, just so it doesn't interfere too much with the rest of the track and just makes it all top end. And then hardly anything done to any of these things. The choir here has got this big concert hall Vienna, one of my favorites in Pro R. It's a really good reverb sound. The drums, a tiny bit of compression, and EQ, a bit of a cut there on probably where the kick drum's coming in. Yeah, maybe just to take some of the bass end out of the kick drum a little bit to fit in with the rest of the track, and then a compressor. Again, not doing a lot, just taming it really. And then what have we got on the synth at the end? Concert hall Vienna again, just to match the choir. And then all of the strings, they just go through one bus. I've put them through all one reverb. This is a Lively Studio sort of preset that I've created. Just 1 second, nothing too much to this reverb. So still quite dry, nothing too wet about it at all. And then finally, just to finish off, let's take a look at what I've got on the master bus. So I've got an EQ here, just to pull everything just a bit brighter at the top end. There's obviously still a bit of something happening there that I wanted to take away. Maybe it's like the bass and the kick drum or something pulling each other together. And then for some reason, why have I got 2 compressors? Is that one doing anything? Sometimes what you do is you add 2 compressors, one on top of each other, so you're not doing all of the work in one. You're kind of doing a lot of the work at the begin with and then kind of like shaping the sound another way. But I think here nothing's happening with this one. You tell me why I've got 2 compressors. Let's have a look at this next one. Yeah, okay, so this one's doing a lot more. Maybe I was just auditioning between the two, and then who knows how these things end up. And then I've got a limiter as well, as always, minus half a dB, and then just pulling up the gain to make sure it is loud as you need it to be. Right, that's everything I wanted to show you for that track. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you've got something out of this video. As you can see, I'm not doing loads and loads of work with my mixes. I'm kind of like trying to make the sounds work as hard as they can do. And what I don't want to do with any of these demo tracks is kind of fool you into thinking they sound a completely different way to how you're getting them out of the box. Hopefully what you've seen here is these are all just regular kind of things that anybody can do in any DAW with most stock plugins and those kind of things. So yeah, hopefully you've learned something out of it. But like I said at the beginning, don't take my mix tips. You've just seen there's 2 compressors and one of them's not really doing anything. So do not take any mix tips away from this video, but hopefully you'll take some composition tips away from it. You'll see some of the sounds that I've used that you haven't seen before. Hopefully there's some good stuff in here that you're going to take away onto your own work. That's it. That's all I've got time for. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up and a like if you like it, because we're a small company. All that support that you give us really means really makes a massive difference to us, and we really appreciate it. That's it. Take care. Hope you're all well, and we'll see you on the next one.